16.
You can't vote.
No.
There's a bit of game
Make sure
going
you're aware of
on.
that. You can certainly, you know, listen and so forth and observe. But,
And you can make comments, Mark, but you can't vote.
That's okay, so long as I'm attending the
I
meeting.
was sitting in the Sunrise board.
You won't be attending the meeting. No, you won't be
I
registered.
think that was the day
You'll be an absent.
it all
That's the rules of
fell
law.
to bits.
Oh, would it?
I don't think you can do it. I think it was the, as I remember, the 14th of the
Are you
7th,
registered as attending
No,
the
no,
meeting?
you won't be.
No, there was a push.
What, you're allowed to participate, but you're not participating.
14th of the 7th, 05.
I don't think she can.
That was the,
Stupid.
no, life was changing before that. But
No.
That was when it officially changed.
that's when the knife came out totally.
It's dumb, isn't it?
Well, we did hear
But,
that.
she can watch
And,
through.
if you wanted to,
She can watch it.
No.
And my ex-wife went in and took my pay.
All right, councillors, I think we're ready to go. My technical man, Matt, says that we are live streaming. And I'd like to declare the meeting open.
That was for everybody. Dear.
I thank you for response. Declare the meeting open. And item live streaming statement, the Everett Council wishes to advise members of the public that council meetings will be recorded and will be available after each meeting on council's website. All care will be taken to maintain the privacy of those in attendance. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence may be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is assumed your consent is given in the event of your image is broadcast. This includes any filming by television cameras if attendance is approved by the General Manager or the Mayor. Item 2.3, acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge that we're here today on the land of the Wamba Parippa people. I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to past Aboriginal elders and the present Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who reside in this area and their future generations. Item 4, statement of purpose. I come here as a councillor freely and without bias to represent the views of the community in considering the matters before us today, to vote in a matter I consider to be in the best interest of the community, and to observe the code of conduct and respect the rule of the chair and the views of my fellow councillors. Item 5 is apologies. We have notification from Councillor McCrabb and Councillor Paul. Someone like to move those previously received. Moved by Councillor Metcalfe, seconded by Councillor Wallace. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Minutes of the previous meeting in February are attached there. 18th of February. Would someone like to move those minutes or a accurate record of what the meeting was there? Councillor Betts moved, seconded by Councillor Hall. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Disclosure of incidents, right down to items 10.1, meetings, Mayor and General Manager meetings. Any comments or questions on those? No, someone like to move that the recommendation that they be received? Moved by Councillor Tidy, seconded by Councillor Wallace. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 10.2, resolution of the council.
Mr. Mayor, this is a monthly report that outlines the resolutions of council that have been that are still outstanding and those that have been closed. So you see in this report there's a number that have been closed out, and it's in accordance with the Act that the will of the council is carried out in a timely manner.
The ones that are closed, do they delete it?
Yes, they're taken off the list.
Any questions or comments on those
Yes.
resolutions?
Yeah, I've just got a question, just on the footpath sweep thing. that was supposed to finish in March. How's that going? Have we had any feedback or?
Yep, through you, Ms. Mayor. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Fagerty. Yeah, so from the workshop, the operations staff have taken that on board, especially around a lease type arrangement, and also no net increase to the budget, and where that can fit in our existing budgets, especially around street sweeping and that. So at the moment, we're looking at putting a report back up to the April workshop with that information, and if that comes into the budget and there's changes, as noted, there won't be any net change. So we'd need to change sort of allocations to areas, but no net change to the budget. So yeah, from the last one, the staff are working through that, and we'll get something up in a
So
couple of
the
weeks.
third option at the moment is, and it could change between now and the April meeting, I understand that. Preferred option is?
The preferred option is a lease arrangement, or working with a contractor to do it. Definitely not a purchase. I think that it's got to prove itself to be viable and cost effective before we actually spend the capital money. So a lease option within existing budgets, that's the preferred option.
And feedback? Look, certainly from an observation point of view, there's certainly been big improvement. But feedback, have we had any particular feedback, particularly from the retailers?
Yeah, not beyond
No.
sort of not beyond that feedback that it is beneficial and good, and it comes through, does a great job. So that's the feedback we've had from that original trial. And unfortunately, over time, it sort of goes back to where it is, so it needs to be done. And that's one of the discussions we're working through, is what is that time period? Do we do it every week? Do we do it every 2 weeks, every month, and that? So, but yeah, it was good feedback in terms that it was effective.
Okay.
How does it operate
Mark.
on the tyre marks on the white tile?
Yeah, that's a bit tough. it does reduce them, but doesn't it?
Thanks.
Councillor
Mark.
Betts.
Can I comment on perhaps comment, is any other councils in the same, they have the same?
I asked that last time.
Yeah, we're just
Did you
following.
get an answer on that?
No, I don't have an answer on that, unfortunately, at the moment. We're following that up, getting the operations staff to follow that up, at what the other councils in the area, whether they are doing with the footpaths. We know that not many other councils do street sweeping, because our street sweeper goes to different councils around the place. So yeah, but once we get some further information on that, I'll pass it on.
Any other questions on those resolutions? All right, everyone comfortable with that? Would someone like to move the recommendation that we note the information there? Moved by Councillor Fogarty, seconded by Councillor Metcalfe. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 10.3, investments and reserves report for February.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is another monthly report. We're asking council to note the investments that we've got totaling 45.6 million at the end of February. The accrued interest that we've received as at the end of February is just over 7,000, and the interest accrued but not yet received is just over 143,000. I'm happy to take any questions.
I've got a question, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Fogarty.
Please see the revised name, investment and reserves, after my comment previously. But it's in relation to the investments and who we've got investments with. And I was just wondering, does Bendigo Bank fit into either an A1 or an A2 tier? Just that, you know, the Bendigo Bank have their community chest and I know from a lot of organisations have changed their banking to Bendigo Bank because of that, because they can see benefits to the community. And I'm wondering when some of our investments mature, should we also be considering that aspect, that we look at supporting the Bendigo Bank and the initiative that they take on board with their community chest?
Through you, Nick. Look, we're happy to look into that and get back to you. But yeah, definitely, we're always looking at options. I'll determine whether or not it's a tier 1 or 2,
Yeah.
and then look at whether or not it's in our advantage to us to go down that option.
Yeah, I think as long as the rate's comparable.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Oh, yeah, it has to, yes,
Yeah.
those things taken
but
into
it does benefit
consideration
our
as
general
well.
community, so
Yeah.
Well, definitely.
Good point.
Mhm.
Any other questions on the, got to get this title wrong, the investment
Reserve.
report? All comfortable? Someone like to move the recommendation that we note and receive the report, please? Moved by councillor Wallace, seconded by councillor Fogarty. All those in favour?
Right.
Yes, carried. 10.4 is the doctors and nurses attraction policy.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is we had a request from the Shiloh Medical Centre for support for a registrar for 12 months to come in and under our what was considered a program that has been budgeted over the last few years to support doctors and nurses into the community. There was a previous decision made that that a policy be adopted that supports this this program, and I couldn't see records that had actually taken place. So I've put up a draft policy for council to adopt, but also made a recommendation around around a doctor's incentive package for this registrar to come in to the community. There has been some feedback to me that this might be a little too high in terms of, I suppose my thinking behind the allocation was previous precedents that had been set with other doctors, albeit those doctors were permanent doctors to come here. So it could be that a council wants to move a motion with a different figure there in point 2. But nevertheless, it's put to council for adoption of the policy and also to support the registrar coming in. And I'm happy to take any questions, Mr Mayor.
Yeah. Questions? Councillor Hall?
Is there any other, do we know that there's any other incentives that the registers get through other state government authorities or anything like that?
Look, I think there is some, and my colleague might have some more information on this. So Sunny, do you have any?
Yeah, sure. So there is, each state has a rural workforce association or similar name. So in Victoria, it's the Rural Workforce Association of Victoria. I think New South has a different name. And their role is to support doctors and health professionals out in rural and Indigenous communities. So some of that is, could be rental assistance, training and development. There's a range of services and also a range of recruitment services they offer as well. So yes, there is support that we can access via those associations.
I suppose my only question around it is being a registrar is this. I think we're always keen to see long-term doctors stay. I always get the feeling registers are very short-term. And is that, whilst it's a short-term benefit to the community, is it a long-term?
So should we have the one figure to fit all
I think it should be,
situations, or
should be
we have
reduced for
a-
registers. Yeah, so it might be half that for a register.
I suppose a registrar is a registrar and a doctor's a doctor.
Correct.
If we're having trouble getting doctors, well, we need somebody, I suppose. Well, how's this fit? Remember the Jorgo one we had, the nurses, the K. Jorgensen?
Oh, yeah.
Is that still functioning or is that?
Good question.
Is that all the money that
Can-
sits there?
We had a bursary we set up for K. Jorgensen many years ago, and that was of that ilk. And I was just wondering whether it got lost in the.
I would suggest
Transition.
that Edward River Council have done nothing in regard to that.
Right.
Who are we looking into that?
Well, I'm just making sure we haven't got 6.5 somewhere and 6.5 somewhere else, Nick. But
So would it have been listed as a reserve
No, it was,
I think possibly.
look after KDOT, we, I think it was close enough to 10 grand or 5 or something like that.
Feeling 5.
Yeah, so we were putting aside $5,000 and virtually putting that to nurse training and things like that.
Right.
So that was in place for Cross.
Oh, so that was like an annual budget
Yeah,
figure that
yeah.
you were putting aside?
Yeah, so that was going to, I think, training of nurses
I
or
can't remember
support.
seeing the last 4 budgets.
No, that's right.
No.
It definitely was, I know when I was administrator, there was something that I think the hospital had it in some type of fund and they were trying to work out what they were doing with it.
Yeah.
But there's definitely discussion around it, or where it ended up. I think it's still in a fund in the hospital.
And what Canargo would give it to the hospital?
Well, I always thought it went to specific training or specific nurses. So I don't think there was a fund. I reckon there was each year it came to the council and it was for a specific person to do some training or something like that. But anyway, beside the point, if that's been lost, well, that's fine. But getting back to where Ash was, well, I don't care if it's a registrar or a doctor or whatever, you know, as long as there's a medical person that can help, that's the most important thing.
The original thing was that the money, I think it was 7,000 that the Cargo used to have.
Yeah.
That it was for doctors on a permanent basis, not a 12-month registrar. And that's why I bring up the point of, you know, do we have a variety of rates?
Yeah.
That he's sure to get a registrar in for 12 months is better than not getting anyone.
Oh, 100%, but I don't, for the long-term benefit of the community, I don't think that's justified to spend the whole lot on a 12-month thing. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, so I wondered, is the 6.5
Because I'm pretty sure that
bit
Charlotte
over the
would be getting
top,
some
given that it
incentives
is
outside
only
of us.
for 12 months?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very sure.
So, Mr Mayor, there is a $10,000 fund set aside in our operating budget, has been for the last few years, and that's where this money would come from. But in terms of how much of that is allocated to a 12-month registrar, there is a part in the policy that says it's up to 2 years, and anything less than 2 years would be reduced pro rata, sort of in a commensurate way. So that could be very much, you know, a message sent that we, as a council, are just adopting it from a rational point of view that, you know, it's 12-month registrar, therefore that equals this certain amount equals so much month's rent. They've indicated that it's $250 a week rent, and that's where it would go. That 6,500 allows for about 6 months worth of rent. It could be the council wants to adopt a 2-month rent incentive, or 1 month, or 3, whatever.
So you've got a pool of 10,000 in the budget already.
Yes.
So is this the only first tranche that we're actually?
It has been allocated in the past. There's 2 doctors, husband and wife doctor team, you may know them, who came in another medical centre, and they were given, and they were given almost $8,000.
Are they still here?
They're still here. And it's very difficult for council in policy to set, you know, a permanent arrangement. So the policy says up, you know, for 2 years, at least 2 years. If they leave before that time, we'd be asking them, essentially we'll pay 50% up front, and then at the end of the 2 years, pay another 50%. That's what's in the policy. And if they obviously left before the 2 years is up, they would not get the second 50%. So whatever figure is put here in part 3, I would implement that policy in accordance. So if it was $6,000, I'll give them $3,000 upfront, and then at the end of the 12-month period, I'll give them another $3,000.
So I wondered then, would 5,000 be a more realistic figure when they're only here for 12 months? That's half
to
the
council.
pool, and they're here for half the time.
The issue you're going to have is, Pat, if we get a doctor that wants to come, and one of the other centres come and say, we've got a full-time medical doctor, we haven't got anything left in, we've only got 5,000.
Yeah, that's right.
But then we'd go into next year's budget, so we'd have 5,000 from this year, and then another 5,000 from next year that we could.
They've got a pool of 10 already.
Hey?
They've got a pool of 10 already.
Yeah. So if we
this
spent
is-
5.
This is only 6.5 of that 10, or is this 6.5 on top of the 10?
Of that 10.
The 10,000 was just not a token, but an item in there so that we've got funds.
So can I just suggest that you actually change it to doctors, registrars and nurses and have your pool of 10,000 and you work out how you split that pool over time with the expressions of interest
Already
that
is
come
a
in.
doctors and nurses policy.
Yeah, whatever.
So they're all covered.
Yeah, as long as a registrar falls under a doctor's.
It does.
But I think that if the pool's 10 grand, we'll leave it to management to work out if there's a need for something, they can work as long as they don't spend it all in upfront.
So that's why I was suggesting that maybe 5,000 to offer 5,000 would be a more realistic
But we got 10 in the budget.
than the
Pat.
6.5. Well, then that would leave another 5
Well,
if
what
another
I-
doctor comes along next
What I'm
week.
saying, Pat, let's think about cage augers and again, bring that sort of idea back in the thinking and bring some nurses and things like that as well.
But this covers nurses,
Yeah, I
this
know.
policy.
Yeah, but that's why I say it should be 10.
There's not enough money.
Would an additional 10?
No, 10 in total.
There is 10.
There
in the
is 10
budget
in
there.
I
total
know, but you're quivering over 5 grand.
to give to this one doctor.
Oh, right. Okay, well, that's management.
Well, management have
It's
asked
gotta be
for our
policy. That's got to
opinion.
be a policy. that
Yeah.
We've got to set, so the management can follow the policy. I
Right.
don't understand.
If I can, councillors,
Yeah.
through you, Mr Mayor. The point 1 is to adopt the policy, and that policy very
Mm.
much covers doctors and nurses and provides some parameters in which the administration can make decisions into the future.
Yeah.
So once that's adopted by council, I can proceed, and I'm more than happy to keep people in the loop, particularly around council support for new doctors coming in. That should be part of it. In terms of point 2, it's really up to the council as to its individual appetite for how much it wants to invest in this one doctor. It could be, and I would suggest to councillors that you look at it from a how many months rent point of view is reasonable for a 12-month registrar.
Okay.
And at the moment, it's about $1,000 a month in terms of rough figures for rental. So if it was 1 month, it'd be 1,000. If it was 2 months, it'd be 2. If it was 3, it'd be 3. So up to you, councillors, to what that number is in point 2.
I'll move a motion, Mr Mayor, that council resolves to adopt point 1 of the recommendation, that point 2 of the recommendation be altered to an incentive package of $5,000 and adopt point 3 as it stands.
So item 2, the 5,000 is for 1 month or 1 year or 2 years? What's the
No,
timeline?
the allocate a doctor incentive package of $5,000 to assist with housing for a new registrar relocating to Deniliquin employed by Shiloh Medical Practice.
And under the surface there, through Mr Mayor, the 5,000 would equate to about 5 months worth of rent.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Can we put in the $10,000 in item 1 so that we actually have it up there saying that we actually do have $10,000 to actually give to nurses and doctors?
But next year we might want to have 12,000
20,000.
or 15,000.
Well,
But it's already in the budget.
That's a
It's currently
budget
in the
figure.
budget.
The 10,000 is in the budget,
Yes.
right? Did everybody know that?
Uh-huh.
It was said at the start of the conversation.
Mm.
So we don't need that in item 1 because it's
No.
already
No.
there.
Fine, fine.
Those who
If it
are-
wasn't there, that's when you'd want to put it in item 1.
I'll second Pat's motion.
Can we put the motion, Mr Mayor?
We can do that. Moved by councillor Fogarty, the motion with the amendment to it, and seconded by councillor Hall. Any other further questions or comments?
No.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Right.
Against? Carried. I thought that was the very quick item too. Item 10.5 is the media, social media and advertising policy.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This is a reiteration, revising of our current media strategy and also adding social media and advertising policies just to get more contemporary around the use of social media, how we interact with the media around stories of note to the community, and also how we manage the advertising under the corporate space, whether it's advertising for community information and or recruitment or so forth. So it's very much a revising of those strategies. Particular note that I know councillors have been having discussions about in the past is that we would strongly recommend that all requests from the Pastoral Times or other media inquiries come via our communications officer. And in that policy, there's no difference between the old and the new, but in that policy, it also says that the spokesman for the council is the mayor, and the spokesperson for the organisation is myself, the general manager. And that can be delegated, but there is a policy around that.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor McAllister. Got a second? Councillor Metcalfe, any questions or comments?
With the election looming, I would have thought the Pastoral Times would be hot onto every councillor for comment. So how do we fit in there?
Well, as the policy says, you can make a comment which is your own opinions and not the council.
Correct.
But that will happen very shortly, I would think.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? All right, recommendations there with 4 different parts to it. Someone like to move that recommendation? We haven't done that, have we? Yes, we have. Yeah. McAllister and Metcalfe. Any further comment? All those in favour?
Yeah.
No.
Against? Carried. 10.6 is the Rural Doctors Network Bursary Program.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is basically just a review of the recent bursary program, which has seen us considerable success. We've had some very good feedback from our participants, Sarah Parker and Emily Pinnock. And it also recommends that the Edward River Council participate again in the Rural Doctors Network bursary program in the 2021-22 financial year for a scholarship of $3,000.
I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Fogarty. Got a second?
And I'll also move it with a big congratulations to Belinda, because Belinda does a fantastic job in organising this and entertaining and ensuring that the bursary students that we get have the best experience they can possibly have while they're here. So well done, Belinda.
Tap on the back. Yep, we've got a seconder for that. Councillor Betts, just the feedback that I've received from the 2 girls who were there by third parties was that they were absolutely blown away with Denny, and because of the work that Belinda's done, you know, and it just opens us up as an attractive area for them to think about coming down the track. And I think they might be happening with one of them too, which is good. Moved and seconded. Any other comments? Or Councillor Wallace?
One scholarship.
Well, there was 2 girls.
Yes, it says there provide a scholarship.
Sorry, through you.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the scholarship of $3,000 includes 1 medical student and 1 nursing student. So the total is 3,000.
Right. Excellent.
Is that in the budget?
Yes.
Yes.
Moved and seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Item 10.
So we're up to 13.5 now, or 13 grand now, Pat.
That's right.
Right, just keep the talent.
We're going.
10.7, Murray-Darling Association, there's an annual conference being held at Wentworth.
Nick.
No.
Right, it's the, we discussed about that, and Councillor Fogarty and myself have an interesting view of the Murray-Darling Association. They're trying to change their name to Murray-Darling Local Government Association too, which is interesting. And we just thought it would be worthwhile putting out to see whether any of the councillors would like to attend, because it's there if they want to. which includes a tour.
Go, Peter, it's an incredible experience.
Oh, yes, of course it is, Tash.
Tour
like
tour
saying-
of Menindee
I said
Lakes, if you haven't been there
incredible.
before.
It's like lead paint drying on a wall. It's toxic.
That's what I said, an incredible, unique experience.
And it is in the budget.
We'll take it out of the budget.
So we'll just leave that as an item there. Have a think about it, and you need to get back by, when's the closing date?
So Mayor, do you see any?
31st of March.
Do you see
Oh,
any,
that's early bird.
It's 4 days.
Is this a good thing to go to, do you think, or are we wasting our money, do you think?
Well,
Yes.
I've been put on as Region 2 on the executive committee.
All right.
And I said I'd be there temporarily representing the council until, well, I'll find out whether there's another councillor who might want to sit on that body. Nick has been there before. Yeah. And I suppose what I'll probably have to do is go to Menindee and spend 2 days there.
All right.
Just,
So you didn't answer the question.
no, but they are trying to be more representative of the whole area, not just 50, above 50% of their membership is in South Australia.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. And that's why everything seems to go south. Anyway,
Even if
so the recommendation is there. All you need to do is put your hand up if you want to go. And Belinda will chase you up.
Busy time of year, mate, but no,
What's that?
busy time of year, mate.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what have we got? The environmental major projects. No
No,
environmental services.
no
report.
mover or seconder, so we'll just say that
It lapsed.
there was no mover, it lapsed.
Environmental services report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is a regular monthly report, noting that there was a couple of typos in the, was that updated? So there was a duplication of numbers, which seems to be, this is the second month in a row, so my apologies. But that represents over $1 trillion worth of investment, which is not correct. It is basically just that number is duplicated, so $1.7 million has been invested in this calendar year. Sorry, the last calendar year. And it also outlines mean gross days and net days in terms of DA processing, and also shows the new applications that have come in and applications determined. So it's just basically a transparent way to report to the community on the amount of building activity and development activity. I've just been told by the team that we've had over the last few days a bit of a spike in applications, so you'll see that reflected in next month's report.
Well, the figures for January and February are excellent.
And which is unusual, generally that's a lot more.
Yes. Yeah, not nearly $2 million for January.
Question.
Councillor Rico.
Our turnaround for a DA submitted is 30 days, 45. I'm still getting a lot of people asking, why is it so slow? And I said, it's not. I said, they can speed it up. And because we've got new or extra people on the ground. Is that possible? Correct.
To Mr. Mayor, do you want to answer that?
I'll also make a comment after.
Good.
Okay, so from an organisational point of view, we're always working towards improving our processes. I've spoken to the councillors before about the notion of continuous improvement and particularly also digitising our process. Look, there's many varied factors around how long a DA takes, and often the clock has stopped, and so the elapsed time is when we're waiting for information back. The elapsed time is a lot longer than the actual counted time. In that report on page 68 of the agenda, the mean net days, which is the actual processing time, is 39 days, which is around about average for other councils. Some councillors are a lot longer. I would just encourage any developer who's concerned about the amount of time that it's taking to either call our manager of planning or myself to just to get to the bottom of it. Sometimes there's little hiccups that are communications that make things appear slower than they are. And it's just a question when we can put some priority onto it.
Because I often say the same thing back and say, well, I think it's up to the applicant. It's obviously holding the application.
Depends on who you're talking to or who's feeding you information, because when I talked to Murray about this a while ago, she was saying that quite often the builder or whatever might be says, yes, I'll put the DA in, and yet 7 months later, council hasn't seen a DA.
Yeah.
And so the developer who's going to fund the project is being told porcupine.
Yeah, well, I've said to them straight away, tell me who the individual application is, and I'll follow it up because.
Well, get them to ring Murray or Phil.
I said, well, it's not council.
Yeah, get them to ring Murray or Phil. That's probably the best way to go. And we might get that 39 days down even further.
Yeah,
Councillor Foley.
just through to the GM, Mr. Mayor, in streamlining that, Phil, have we got some easy checklists that lists everything so that people can actually tick those things off? And, you know, if they've ticked all those things off when they submit the DA, everything's there to be assessed. Have we streamlined the system to that? Because that's certainly not of recently, but that was one of the things in the past that I had frequently heard, that people would go in with the DA thinking they had all of the information and then be told, oh, but now you need rah, rah, rah. They'd get that, oh, but now you need rah, rah, rah. So rather than the all buts, if we have a form that says you need to provide us with blah, 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 all these things, and they can tick off as those things are provided. Do we have a system such as that?
Not at this stage, but it's very much in the intent of the team. They've literally in the last week or so done a brainstorming session on quick improvements that can be made. It was only up until last month that there was only 2 people in the team, and we're carrying 3 vacancies. Now we filled those vacancies. Some of those people haven't even come yet. So now that we've got a much better capacity to do things, we're no longer keeping our heads above water. We can now do some proactive work. So very much a checklist, things to help, particularly mums and dads investors, if they need to navigate their way through what is a complex planning system and building system. Some checklists can only help. I'd also encourage anybody who's thinking of doing a development within our region to just give us a ring. We're more than happy to have a conversation, even 2 or 3 conversations, to provide direction and guidance on what we're looking for before they submit the application. So we're very much here to help. But those sort of simple checklists for maybe it's a split of a subdivision, you know, splitting one block into 2, or some other easy kind of application can very much be helped by having those checklists. So that's very much in the plan.
A lot of work was done previously on just that, and there was some basically checklists put in place. The encouragement of pre-DA meetings with the staff, so they can go and actually sit down and have that chat. This is what you need. But definitely, I think we need to go and take that step further and actually have an advertising campaign that we can say put out there, and even in it's a full page spread in our PT. This is what we suggest you need to do for your DAs, and put it out there so that the wider public can see it. But yeah, the biggest ones that I've found from people starting off is they've got to go and have that pre-DA meeting. So then here's all the stuff you need, and make sure that there's no. Yeah, but there's always a few things that they come in. Oh, we didn't know how to get this then. Like to do a fire assessment and all this type of stuff. Like that's pretty onerous on people. They get a bit scared of that, but it's quite simple if there's no issues. But they have to be told that. We have to be proactive as council to make it as, in layman's terms, as simple as we can.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions on that?
I had a question, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if it's appropriate or not.
They all are.
Environmental services report. I think I requested a meeting a couple of meetings ago with the weeds people put a report in. Has anything happened with that? You know, the Weeds County Council, we used to have a committee that ran and the board and the works, and now they sort of disappeared.
Well, it's now under our umbrella.
Yes.
But we're not getting any information back.
Well, we don't know what they're up
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor, I do recall that request from you, Councillor Wallace. That is under Mark Dalzell's team, so more than happy to.
Yeah, I'll take that on board and apologise. That's not
No,
news
that's
for
fine.
this one. That and we've been talking in the office around infrastructure report as well. So with that and the major sort of areas picks up with that, that would then provide council sort of across all the activities. So definitely weeds and infrastructure that we're looking at regular reports to council.
Very good.
Any other comments or questions? Would someone like to move that the council note the environmental services report? Moved by councillor Betts, seconded by councillor Metcalfe. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. 10.9 major works, major projects program for March 2000 progress report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So reports the monthly update on the major projects, grant funded projects, and how the projects are progressing, which is well. Information and report around the Maud Road project, which is going well, and council staff have committed to continue on that for the rest of this current year, and then also into 21-22. So at this point in time, council with its own staff will complete that whole project. The town hall, and thanks councillors who came for the walkthrough at the workshop. That was a very good, actually. I hadn't been through it either myself. So and the comments in that were appreciated, especially around the render and that. So we're talking a bit more with the builder, just how we handle the render in the estates office. You'll see there's a report later on around stage 4. And we've just got the quote in for the audio visual system, and it is revealing that. So that's coming through. It's in the project budget, so it's around that area.
Is it within that area of the project budget?
Yes, yeah. So what's been
that's
allowed
good.
for in the project budget, it's in that. I think one part, one provisional sum part is a bit more than what the budget is, and that's what we're looking at. But the essential parts within the budget. Works down at Memorial Park, both with the change room and the works at the netball courts are commencing. So it'll be good to get them going. Waring Gardens opened again, and we got again good feedback on Waring Gardens. There's just a couple of issues just to still complete there, mainly around the children's playground and the fence for the children's playground and the fence along Napier Street. So they're in train with those areas. In terms of the local road community infrastructure projects,
I'll just pull you up there. Was there ever gates on the Senator?
not that I'm aware of. I've never
Yes,
seen
there
gates.
were apparently. And I-
Because there's noise
Yeah.
going around.
Yes, because I've.
What's happened to
same
the
thing,
gates?
What's happened to the
gates?
gates? Yes, I believe there were.
I think you can see on where
On
the
those two side panels.
you can see where the hinge has been taken off.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying re-erect them. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
Where are they?
I think the Historical Society could have some interest.
Yes, so there is,
Yeah.
not that I,
Yeah.
hear the noise on social
No,
media, but
Yeah.
we don't. We're talking with the Historical Society at the moment around the gas lamp and that. So we
Yeah.
definitely with those discussions, just
Well-
ask them what information they've got on the gates. I haven't been aware that there's been gates there. so
Yeah,
more than
yes.
happy to-
Apparently they are somewhere.
If we're not at the
In
bottom
one
of the
of
lagoon.
those really good storage things, you know, a bit like when you put something in a safe place.
Never ending.
Then you can never remember where the safe place is.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate, that was
No,
just a-
no worries, no, thanks.
diversion.
Just in LRCI, so the quotations are going out for the dog park and the work at the Island Sanctuary and that. Indicative costs around the fencing for the dog park is around 25,000 for the chain mesh with PVC. And that's the better option, but we're still included in there the two options for the fencing as was discussed before. But the maximum that will be, that's based on, we've got quotes for materials and we've doubled them to get a sort of normal install price. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions?
Any questions? Maud Road, my original recollection was that council was going to do 2 Ks and then 6 Ks via contract. So what changed that?
What's changed it is the performance of our staff. So they've worked very well and delivering on that well. And we feel it's a lesser risk to council that we continue to do the project rather than if we do put it out to contractors. It is in a remote area, so the contractor has to deal with those issues, and our staff seem to have are dealing very well with working in that remote area. I've spoken with operations a lot about, well, it's a significant expenditure, the significant resources and how that's impacting, and they're looking at it mainly sort of impacts around maintenance. The team that's doing it would mainly be doing maintenance. So operations are looking for a contract grader who can pick up that maintenance work for us. So, yeah, so we're definitely mindful that nothing's for free. That in committing to Maud Road, there's an impact elsewhere. Sort of managing that.
Question?
Councillor Metcalfe.
So with the contractor coming on board, you reckon he might be at senior level? Because we haven't seen graders there work for a very long time, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'll take that on notice.
Well, you're currently doing a service review anyway.
Yes.
And I think what we're trying to do is get some balance back into the equation about what's done in the rural area and what's done in town. I think that's the general purpose we can
Disagree. There's a lot out our way.
Yeah, but you've only got one road.
You only have one road, and while they're out there, they may as well do a lot of.
Well, while they're out there, not out our way.
Just the North Denny rest stop. If I can put a question through to Mark, how are we going? We run a bit on target for the tenders to go out in March?
Yes, Councillor Fogarty, those tenders have gone out. So the request for quotations for that one has gone out. So that's based on, they just gave a bit of a sketch mud map with the workshop, and as we've discussed, it's scoped to budget. So seen as a stage one, we know there's more work to do if we get funding. Yeah, so that's gone out. We're just waiting for those prices to come back in.
Councillor Metcalfe.
The plans, are they still currently what we initially agreed on?
Plans for
the north side truck stop or rest stop?
We had a variety of proposals.
Truck stops.
Well, no, okay, rest stop.
Yes. So the plans for stage one are just for the car park area into that area with a new amenities building. Future stages are still in line with the strategic plan with meeting areas and that, and yeah, we haven't looked too far into delivering stages 2 and beyond at this point in time.
You should have a map of it.
I should have more things.
Any other questions, comments?
I had a question. Just reading, Mr. Mayor, about this Tech 1, it seems to be going along rosily. Everything seems to be happy. Is that the consensus of the staff?
Yes, it is. It's going well. We're due for completion at the end of this year, and it's tracking well. So everything is going on schedule. We've have had some add-ins with it's called a SaaS uplift, that essentially puts everything we've got to the cloud, and also offers us some savings in the long term as well. So we've added that into the project, but that's been within the original budget. So it's been at no extra cost.
The further question, if this, say, for example, in the fleet, the plant is, can we get a list, does it provide a list of all the plant we have and the age of that plant?
Sure. Yeah, the
Yep.
plant
Once it's
register,
in.
so we have a plant register at the moment that just sits in spreadsheets, which does have that information, and been working on it for the last few years as sort of put it together with the former councils. That will be uplifted into Tech One. So yeah, that information will be available.
Will be available.
Now, we've been looking at it as we've been doing the 10-year plan in the budget and that, so work with the supervisor for that.
Max probably raised a question that I had looking through the workshop papers with the budget, and we get down to looking at Tech One. The figure that for this year was $980,000, and next year is just over $1 million. Now, what does that contain? What makes up that? Tech One, if my memory is right, $1.5 million to buy originally, the system.
Oh, more. I thought it wrong.
Or-
Thought about it.
So is therefore Tech One $1 million a year to operate?
So there will be licensing costs that we will continue to have to operate.
$1 million.
No, I'll have to take that on notice and come back to you with that.
There was a 3 or 4 or 5 year program
yeah.
with the consultants to bring this up to speed. Because we knew we had to invest in it heavily to get it up to speed. And I think that's, yeah.
So how long is that for the next decade?
The licensing costs.
Forever.
I can't remember us being told during this whole process about what we're going to do with Tech One. Always seem to have hiccups all the time, but wait, there's more.
I think there's a detailed report.
So what we've got is the original project scope that we're completing. But Tech One is a big system that we may choose to continue to build on. So for example, they've got an integrated planning module. They've got various other things that over time we may choose to build upon and, and have a better system and get some efficiencies out of that. With any thing like Tech One, we are going to have ongoing licensing costs with any system that we get. But so we would close the scope. What we're looking at is closing the scope of the Tech One project at the end of this year. And then over time, if we see some other things, we'll bring that to council for a decision.
So Norm, this does come through the audit committee, and essentially they did have, originally they had contractors that didn't quite come up to scratch, and I think you might remember that they went through a process and then they came back and restarted that process totally. So at the end of the day, once the first iteration of Tech One is installed, the last update they gave at audit was the fact that it was actually under budget compared to where they started 3 years ago. So from there, the ongoing stuff, I don't think there is I'm with Sonny on this, you've got licensing and you've got updates of modules, the whole thing that's going to continue on. Like these things don't stop, Norm. And, if you're ever involved in SAP and things like that, it will continue, but it's probably a good opportunity if there's some questioning about out years and what's going to happen, to get a report back, and whether you bring that through the audit committee or you get Mark in here to have a chat.
Look, I hear from Mac and I hear from Nick about what's not happening out in the field. People out in that area, because of not grading not happening, don't really care about how much. If we're spending $1 million there, should we be only spending 500,000?
Well, what I'm saying,
so therefore that money could be released to get on-ground work done.
No, what I'm saying is it is coming in under budget of what was in the budget to be spent. Okay, so I wouldn't be sort of saying you're spending $1 million on Tech One, you should be spending it somewhere else. What I'm saying is it's coming in under budget of what was resolved to be spent.
Mr. Mayor, if I can, council's at the moment considering all of the major projects. This seems to be of interest to many of the councillors in the Tech One, so we'll take it on notice to bring back a bit of a snapshot progress report in more
And
detail with the Tech One
And
project,
out years.
including a reconciliation of money spent versus how much is left around budgets, and what ongoing costs will be
Future
following
costs, yeah.
following the completion of the project. And I've said it before to council, very much is it's an enterprise-wide system, you would call it. So it does many things, not only managing finances, but also capital works, operational programs, management of assets, issuing of DAs and building permits. So it does many things, which is why it's such a pretty expensive. And in line with sort of contemporary practice, very much I am of the mind and recommend that council supports ongoing building on the system, because it can only get better as you progressively digitise and transform the way you do things through automation within electronic. One of those things has been taking it to the cloud. That means if the building we have finishes, gets hit by a bus, the proverbial bus, or, can no longer be used, we can just simply go to another place, get access to the internet and use our system. So things like that we'll bring forward in another report.
The point that I'm probably trying to make is that Tech One has a very wide range of things you can do with it. Now, are we taking the big picture, or are we taking what's a functional approach toward council? In other words, I don't believe if we can operate with a Holden instead of a Mercedes, we should be operating with a Holden, to spend their money in a better way.
So true. To answer that, Mr. Mayor, yes, so we probably are looking more at the Holden model. I look at that, so because it is a big system, and we've looked at our priority areas to implement, and that's the scope of the project. So that's what we're looking at. So, if we're looking at those big ticket items, finance, asset management, planning, those sorts of things, where there are a lot of other modules that we could be doing that we weren't scoped into the project, that we're probably, they'd be great to have. But
Put on the wish list, but not
exactly. So yeah.
But can I just make a comment? The biggest thing was when the decision was made that we were going to do exactly what you said, we knew we had to bring the expertise in, because the current staff were floundering because they had their own workload to do, and they couldn't implement and learn the system at the same time. So we knew we had to invest heavily, and it was a big heavy investment for this period of time to get it up to a certain speed, where council, the Holden, that's where we're at. We're not at a Mercedes, we're at the Holden level.
Councillor Wallace.
The mayor is right. It is, according to the budget, is going up about 102 grand a year. So we'd like to know in the report whether that's ongoing, or is it just because we're getting going with it? Or?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, look, we will have, like I said, the ongoing licensing costs. So our licensing costs will increase. However, with the SaaS uplift, for example, our licensing costs have increased, but our purchase of all the hardware and those things has dramatically decreased, and the net result is a saving. So instead of going out, because we would have had to replace all our equipment next financial year, we're not having to do that, but we do have the additional licensing cost.
And probably it's fine, I'm comfortable with what I said, but what Max point I was just thinking, in 10 years' time, if we're going up at 10% a year, we're going to double. All right, the cost now, is that best way to spend their money? Just pose that question.
That'll be in the report.
Councillor Fogarty's got a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Fogarty.
Yes, training, Mr. Mayor. We
Was
might
sadly
have
lacking.
the Mercedes, or we might have the Volkswagen, but if the staff haven't been trained to drive either of them or any of them, they might as well sit in the garage.
They're autonomous cars these days, Pat.
Hey?
They're autonomous.
So how are we going with training? Does everybody know and does everybody have the level of expertise that they need to have for whatever their functionality is in regards to Tech One?
I can't answer that.
So staff have been trained. As new staff come on, we don't have budget for, Tech One to come in and do formal training. We've done over the time, we've brought them in, the specialists, to train our staff. So we've had them work with, for example, the infrastructure team when doing the asset management module. We've still got ongoing support there. So yes, we do have training for our staff. I think over the COVID period, some of those new staff that have come in probably haven't had you know, the same level, because it's very hard doing something, you know, via Zoom as opposed to sitting beside someone. So there has been a couple of staff that probably didn't get, you know, over their induction period because of the circumstances, the training that typically would have. But, you know, it is depends on the person. So, you know, someone in Mark's team is going to get a lot more training on asset management. Me, for example, I get more training on the finance system, and it is job specific. So, and we do have resources in the business that will sit down and train some people. But we do regularly, as we implement new things, we will get formal training for groups.
Councillor Becker.
So, for somebody with the new staff coming on board, does that mean that anyone who comes in, have they got Tech One experience, or do we have to start from scratch? Or do we have a request that when anyone who comes in has got to have a certain criteria of experience?
It depends on the role. So, you know, as some roles would be a very big advantage to have Tech One experience. So typically that would obviously be someone within local government that has used Tech One. But it's typically, it will be role dependent. And if they don't have the Tech One experience and they need that training, we'll give them that training. So whether it's formal or via our staff, we'll make that determination on the role.
Could I just suggest that we get Mark in to talk through all this, because he's better.
Taking that on those, Councillor. Mark Sienna, our team manager. And we will provide a more detailed report through to a workshop in the next month or so on the Tech One project, and allow you know, a lot more questions.
Councillor Wallace.
I just noticed, Mr Mayor, that the training in this coming year's budget's dropping by 52 grand. So the people that come in from Tech One to train, does that come in as training, or is it coming as under consultants?
So the ongoing training required. So we have had some budget in the project budget for training as we went, but in the long term that will come in under the training budget.
So why are we dropping 52 grand?
Because we have the requirement to do budget cuts, and we can go through that.
Right.
That's
Yep.
got the
Sorry.
information in the workshop.
For another time.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions on the major projects program? Before I look for a move, I'd just like to publicly say, in regard to Wearing Gardens, to Mark and Paul, which I've personally spoken to, a job well done considering the dramatic circumstances that have gone through the whole game, and to get a result that we've got, and still there's a few things to do, as you said, but to the team, well done.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and for the contractor as well.
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah,
they're part of the team, and we do have a good contractor there who was able to work with us through those issues. And
welcome you back in, John.
Yes, very much so.
I'd just like to say I'd like to congratulate the team on the Maud Road. The words I'm getting, and mainly out of Hay, is fantastic.
So increase in trucks?
Hay rate
I don't know about that, but they were much happier.
Looking after hay rate pays.
That's it. That's why I've
Job
never
done.
done that.
No other comments? Someone like to move the note to change approach program? Moved by Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Betts. All those in favour? Yes, carried. I think that concludes our normal meeting, but we need to go and address confidential matters. Would someone like to move that we go into confidential council? Moved by Councillor Hall, seconded by Councillor Wallace. All those in favour? Against? Carried. A moment to cut live streaming.